Desperate Venezuelans getting desperater and desperater. We're going to talk about that and an act of naval idiocy coming up on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for being a part of the Hot Zone today. Man, I am actually getting tired of reporting on Venezuela. I mean, how long can this slow motion train wreck just continue? It's been going on for years now. Back in 2015, it got so bad, people started just leaving by their millions. And now over 5 million people have escaped Venezuela and walked into Colombia and into other countries like Peru and Ecuador and Panama and the United States and everywhere else. Venezuelans don't want to live in Venezuela anymore. And it's not because it's not a beautiful country. It is. It's not because they don't have massive natural resources. They do. It's because socialism has absolutely destroyed everything good about that country. And one of the terrible things about all those people leaving is that old people, elderly people who they just can't walk 500 miles to Bogota to try to get a job, ended up being alone, living alone. They say there are over 1 million people over the age of 70 living alone in Venezuela right now. And what are they supposed to do? Their little pension amounts to basically be like you getting $3 a month to buy food with. I mean, what are you going to do with $3 a month? How are you going to buy food with that? And these people are slowly starving to death in their apartments. That's what's happening. It's euthanasia on a massive scale because Venezuela simply can't provide for its own citizens. This is the horror of socialism right here. Now, like I say, millions of Venezuelans have walked into Colombia. These are the poorest of the poor. The wealthy Venezuelans left and went to the United States or Spain or somewhere like that. But the poorest of the poor simply walked out of Venezuela and walked into Colombia hoping for a better job. And many of them were able to get jobs in Colombia, whether or not it was a menial job, selling things on the street, or working as a maid in somebody's house, or working in a factory, or even working as a prostitute. At the very least, they were able to get jobs. Now, a year ago, I was in Cúcuta, Colombia, and I was reporting on the massive migration of people walking out of Venezuela into Colombia. Take a look.
Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans have come streaming across this border trying to escape the third world conditions inside their own country. So many have come out in the last few weeks that the border area outside Cúcuta, Colombia is sheer chaos. With Venezuelan currency all but worthless, people do whatever they can to get enough to survive, selling candy, coffee, and even their own hair. Crime, prostitution, and drug use are rampant, and after dark, these filthy streets become a giant open-air sleeping area for hundreds of families, including many small children, because they simply have nowhere else to go. It's a hard life to be sure, but for so many, even this is better than what they left behind. 17-year-old Wendy came here a month ago from Valencia, Venezuela, where 2 weeks' salary was just about enough to buy this 1-pound bag of flour. But after sleeping on the ground and being unable to sell enough to get by, she's starting to have second thoughts.
Well, I have been here for 1 month. I left because of the situation in Venezuela, because of Maduro. But here it is very difficult. Staying here, sleeping on the street, perhaps it would be better back there because I have a family, help, and a bed. And here I am suffering by sleeping on the street.
It doesn't take long for most who cross here to realize staying in Cúcuta is unsustainable, since the city's now said to hold more Venezuelans than Colombians. So thousands of Venezuelan refugees are picking up and walking the highway south, carrying little more than hope in their bags.
So they say if you want to understand somebody, you have to walk a mile in their shoes. That's why I'm out here on this busy highway with this family that's walking from Cúcuta, Colombia all the way to Bogota. and it's very dangerous. As you can see, there's lots of these big trucks going by. They've got their little kids with them. And the problem with walking a mile in somebody's shoes is that so many of these people don't have any shoes. And that's where Operation Blessing comes in.
Most of the migrants from Venezuela are walking uphill for several hours in really bad conditions to reach Pamplona first and then go to Bucaramanga or other big cities, bigger cities than Cucuta.
Operation Blessing has been providing shoes and socks to those who need them along the trail. But more than that, along with local Christian organizations, they've been sharing the love of Christ in other ways.
Today we're planning to have a medical brigade here on the way to Pamplona. Also, Operation Blessing is bringing some water solutions, so we're going to be setting up a water station, clean water station for the migrants. So even when we are not here, they're going to be able to just walk by, open the faucet, refill their bottles, and it's going to be safe water for them.
Unlike the migrant caravans traveling out of Honduras last November, very few of these Venezuelans say they plan to go to the United States. Another difference is that the majority we spoke to said they'd be happy to turn around and go back home, just as soon as Nicolas Maduro and his regime are no longer in power. In the meantime, Operation Blessing will be here to help these weary travelers keep walking toward a better life.
So now here's the problem. Many of these people, because of the COVID virus, shutting down economies all around the world, these people are the most vulnerable, the most fragile economically at living in Colombia. And so many of them are now being kicked out of their apartments where they were holed up with, 13 or 14 other people. And they literally have nowhere to live. They have no way to get food. There's nobody out on the street, so they can't sell their wares or whatever they were trying to sell on the street. There's not even people visiting prostitutes anymore very much. So they are now really just stuck between a rock and a hard place, way more than they were before. And they have this choice to make. I've still got my grandma living back in Venezuela, and she doesn't have any food. We don't have any food. There's no food to be had, but at least maybe we can grow a little something or something like that. The economic opportunity that we had in Colombia is gone for the moment, but we don't have any way to get back to Venezuela. So now they've turned around and they're retracing that journey, that 500-mile journey from Bogota or even further away, back into the hellhole of Venezuela, where nothing awaits them, nothing.
Because they are evicting us from our rental and we don't have work. We don't even have a way to feed our children, and it's really difficult.
What will you find in your country since you left because you had nothing? What will you find in your country now?
Well, at least there we won't get evicted from our rental.
Right now along that border, the border is completely closed, but they just have to cross illegally back into their own country. The problem with that, right now, Nicolas Maduro is freaked out because the United States has sent naval vessels down close to Venezuela, and he is absolutely convinced that we are about to pull off a Panama-style invasion of his country. Now, is that likely? No, it's not likely. We would love to shut down the narco trafficking that's happening from Venezuela, as I talked about on the podcast the other day. The drug trafficking that Nicolas Maduro has been doing has been supplanting the income he used to get from petroleum. And it amounts to about 15% of their GDP at this point. And so the sanctions that we have on that country are partially ineffective because they are making so much money from cocaine that they're allowing to transit through their country. The cocaine is grown in Colombia, it's shipped into Venezuela and out of Venezuela to the rest of the world, or mostly to the United States. It's also a way that Maduro can undermine the United States by shipping poison into our borders. So the United States is taking a harder stand on stopping that flow of drugs, and they've declared Nicolas Maduro a criminal, a narco trafficker. And he is absolutely convinced that we're about to invade his country. So much so that he has activated the National Guard and sent them to the Colombian border because he claims that there are U.S.-led forces about to cross the border from Colombia and invade Venezuela. And he's moved artillery and tanks and all sorts of things up to that border. And now he claims that he has had to do that to defend his country against the United States. Check it out.
I have an obligation to make aware the national and international public opinion and prepare ourselves. In the next few hours, I have ordered, within the framework of the permanent Bolivarian shield operation, to mobilize artillery pieces to be prepared for the fight for peace. Ceasefire, ceasefire. Let's go to a humanitarian agreement.
So if that wasn't weird enough, if that wasn't freaky enough, in the middle of all this COVID virus stuff, we have the biggest act of naval idiocy I think I've ever seen coming out of Venezuela. So it happened when a cruise ship, the RCGS Resolute, happened to be drifting in international waters north of Venezuela. This is about 13 miles off the shore of the Isla Tortuga, which belongs to Venezuela, but territorial waters only extend 12 miles. So they were 13 miles out. They were drifting there and working on one of their engines. They were performing some routine maintenance. And all of a sudden at midnight, a naval ship from, a literal ship from Venezuela shows up in international waters and hails the RCGS Resolute. Basically, they tried to pull him over. They said, "You're coming with us, follow us into port. We're taking control of your ship." Well, the Resolute captain was like, wait a minute, we're in international waters. That's pretty clear. So he's radioing to he's making a phone call to his bosses, I think in Spain or Portugal, I think is where they're actually based out of. And in the meantime, sailors on the Venezuelan Navy ship start firing on a cruise ship. Now, there were only crew on board. They didn't have any cruisers, but they start firing on the ship. And the real interesting thing that I haven't seen in the media, but as you start to watch the footage and stuff, they're shooting at a cruise ship with AK-47s. Their sailors are out there with AK-47s. Here's some of the footage. They're shooting at the ship with AK-47s. Now, this naval vessel, I checked, it has 12.7 millimeter cannons. It has 72 millimeter guns on it. And it has anti-aircraft missiles. So if they really wanted to take out this cruise ship, they could have done it with bigger weapons, except I think what that tells us is that they don't have any ammo for those weapons. They don't have they don't have any way to shoot with anything more than AK-47s. Either that, or they just didn't want to sink or actually damage the cruise ship. But that narrative doesn't quite work, because what happened next? The Venezuelan Navy ship then tries like a pit maneuver on the RCGS Resolute, on a cruise ship. They try to ram the thing. That doesn't happen. You don't do that. That is ridiculous, okay? So here they try to ram this ship, and they do it so poorly. Here's what happens. They obviously didn't realize that this particular cruise ship belongs to the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. That's what the RCGS stands for. And it's made as an icebreaker, and it has what's called a bulbous prow. Now, when I was a kid, one time I flipped my bike over and landed on my face on the pavement, and I got a hematoma in my nose, and it stuck out like this for about a month. And my dad called me bulbous beak, because he was obviously very empathetic with my plight. but that's what it sounds like, is a bulbous prow. This ship has a giant steel ice-breaking hull. And so when this naval vessel from Venezuela tried to pit the ship, what they actually ended up doing was tearing open their own hull, and they sent their own ship to the bottom. This naval vessel, this warship, crashed into the RCGS Resolute, tore open its hull, and went straight to the bottom. All the sailors abandoned ship. The cruise ship did what it should have done, which is just it stayed in the area, offering to save these sailors, so nobody died that I know of. But then the RCGS Resolute just kind of went on its way, and it was really none the worse for wear. It's got a few scratches. It's got a little tiny bit of damage, but nothing that it can't fix right away and be right back on it. So a monumental act of naval idiocy from Venezuela, and proof, I think, that Venezuelan military is so badly equipped that if we decided to invade Venezuela, it wouldn't be a big fight. Now, it would probably be a bigger fight than it was when we came to Panama because Venezuela is a much larger country. They have a much larger military. They have jets. Just in July of last year, a Venezuelan jet basically tried to do the same thing to an American jet that was over the Caribbean. It came and shadowed, acted very unprofessionally, and there's actually footage of it following this American jet. So they've got fighter jets, they've got helicopters, they've got artillery, they've got things that the Panamanian military really didn't have. So it would be a bigger fight. But in reality, the United States knows all it has to do is keep the pressure on Venezuela, and eventually it will collapse under the weight of its own evil. That's what's going to happen. Now, the Trump administration appointed a special representative for Venezuela, Elliot Abrams. He's a longtime diplomat, and he recently gave a briefing about what's going on there and what the U.S. is trying to do about it. Here's what he had to say.
There will be more steps and further pressure in the coming weeks and months. The United States remains firmly committed to the people of Venezuela and to the cause of freedom there. And as we saw when President Guaido received an ovation during the State of the Union message, this cause has bipartisan support in the United States. We look forward to the day when Venezuela is free and all our sanctions can be lifted. Until that day comes, the pressure will continue and it will build steadily.
So as the pressure continues to mount on Venezuela and this COVID virus continues to pressure the entire economy of the world, the people of Venezuela are those who are suffering most. Let's hope and pray that this year, in 2020, the situation in Venezuela will finally be resolved. The Trump administration has tried everything it can do short of military action to make that happen, and they're continuing to keep the pressure on, and I believe that's the right thing to do. That's all I've got for the Hot Zone today. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.